But the UFO thing, as far as I'm concerned, it may sound circumstantial to some, but as far as I'm concerned, it's proven. As part of the disclosure project, there was Donna Hare, a NASA photographic scientist who had up to secret clearance, was in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, she says in her testimony, and that one of her colleagues was doing some photographic work, invited her over to look at it, and she saw high-res satellite imagery, maybe half a K above the treetops. I think it was like a white disc, and she at first thought, oh, it's a blob in the emulsion, you know, some kind of fault with the photographic process. And he said, well, look, you know, blobs in the emulsion don't have perfectly formed shadows going in the same direction as the trees, etc., etc. All the detail was there. And she basically was saying that they had this whole place in Building 8 for airbrushing out UFOs on a regular basis, because they then, you know, sell on their imagery to universities and the like. And having been all over other NASA installations already, I assumed the blank password scanning method would work the same in Johnson Space Center, and it did. Once I was in there, I used various network commands to strip out the machines that were in Building 8, and got onto those. And the very first one I was on literally had what she said. I can't remember if it was filtered and raw, processed and unprocessed, but there was definitely folders whereby there was a transformation in the data taking place between one and the other. These folders were full of images in a proprietary NASA format, or in a format I'd never seen before, no JPEGs or GIFs. They're also 200 to 300 megabytes in size, and being on a 56k dial-up modem, there's no way I was going to download it. It's like 5 minutes per megabyte. So what I did, the remote control program that gives you graphical control of the machine, turned the resolution right down, turned it down to I think 4-bit color, and then on the desktop of the NAS machine, navigated to the folder, double-clicked on the first image. The application launches, the image comes up on the screen, but it's still very, very slow. And what I saw, I was hoping to see exactly what she was describing, you know, sources and very definite imagery. And what instead I saw was, I assume it was the Earth. This was in sort of shades of grey, but you had the Earth's hemisphere, I think about 2/3 of the screen, and then halfway between the top of the hemisphere and the bottom of the picture, there was a classic sort of cigar-shaped object, but with, you know, the sort of golf ball domes, geodesic domes, above, below, and this side, and I assume the other side as well, so the left and right as well, and with very slightly flattened cigar ends. No seams, no rivets, no sort of telemetry or antennae or anything like that, and it just had a feeling of not being man-made. There was none of the sort of signs of man-made.
So in essence it was a craft, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And
when I first saw the top half of it, I thought, oh, bollocks, you know, a boring satellite picture or something. But as more of the thing was revealed, it was obvious it wasn't like any satellite I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And I've been space mad since I was about 14, so I've seen lots of pictures of satellites.
Okay, so you knew what you were looking at to some degree. So, can you tell me what else you found? Because I know that you have something, have some information in regard to non-terrestrial officers, is that right?
Yeah, there was an Excel spreadsheet, and the title was non-terrestrial officers. Then it had names, ranks. It wasn't a long list, didn't even fill the whole screen, I think.
Well, could you just generally say how many? I mean, if you were to guess, are we talking 20, 50?
20. Maybe 30.
Did you notice if they were male or female by chance?
That I can't remember.
Okay. First names and last names?
Definitely ranks, but nothing to say, you know, Army captain or Navy captain or...
so the designation wasn't there as far as which organization they worked for. Huh.
So I mean, that was entitled non-terrestrial officers, and obviously it's not little green men, so I was thinking, you know, what force is this? And that phrase is nowhere to be found on the web or in official Army documentation or anything. And the other thing was a list of ship-to-ship and fleet-to-fleet transfers. You know, bear in mind, fleet-to-fleet, so multiple ships, of materials. And these ships weren't, you know, US Navy ships. Again, I don't remember any of the names, but I remember at the time looking and trying to match up the names, and there wasn't anything that matched.
So, now this theoretically would have been pretty top secret information if indeed non-terrestrial is what it sounds to be, which is off-world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I gleaned from that information, I surmised that an off-planet sort of space marines is being formed. And if you actually look at DARPA, Defence Advanced Research and Projects Agency literature at the moment in the last few years, and a lot of the government space command stuff, it's all about space dominance. You know, and it really is, you know, the final frontier. So I think, yeah, it's natural for them to want to control space and be developing a space going forward in secret. But I think most likely using technology reverse engineered from ET.
To get out there, in other words.
Yeah, and also to be cloaked. I mean, otherwise, how many other governments would see this going on?
So, and this was, what part, I mean, was this NASA? Where was this? Are you at liberty to say?
Again, I wish I was. I find it so hard to remember all of it. It's strange, I can remember IP addresses, but lots of the names and where I was when I found particular things. I remember thinking at the time, oh, this must be NASA and the Navy, and all, you know, secret parts thereof. So it was either the Navy or NASA I was in, most likely. But I think it was most likely the Navy, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. So at this point, this kind of a discovery is really stupendous, right? I mean, for any researcher to come across something like that is pretty intense.
If what I surmised to be correct was correct, yeah, and it does kind of point that way, I think.
Okay, are you familiar with the Serpo story? We've mentioned it. I mentioned it to you, but I don't know if you've actually, because you're not on the web, right? You haven't been on the web for a number of years.
That's correct, yeah.
That's part of your, what do you call it, probation?
Bail conditions, yeah.
So perhaps you didn't know about it, but it's an alien-human exchange program that supposedly took place between, I think it's 1968, 1978, and there's been a release of information on the web, and I've given you an article here from the Fortean Times to kind of fill you in with it. But just offhand, in hearing about this, there were 12 astronauts that actually went to another planet. The planet was called Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli system, supposedly. Now, a lot of people say this is all disinfo, but the interesting thing is that when you say non-terrestrial officers, there's actually a chance that it could be the Serpo astronauts that this is referring to. Does that link up for you at all?
Well, I mean, yeah, it certainly could do. I think all things are possible in these kind of cases. I mean, yeah, just the fact that it's not based on Earth doesn't necessarily mean it's orbiting Earth, does it? It could just be based on another planet, another solar system.
Right, because it's just non-terrestrial, meaning not on the Earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking about people that are based somewhere else in the solar system, theoretically, whether they're circulating, you know, circling the planet in a spaceship, or they're actually on another planet.
Right. Ridiculous.
What about the Majestic? Are you familiar with the Majestic site, website with Majestic documents, top secret documents, that some of which have been sort of exposed?
Yeah, I've heard about that. See, at the time, I wasn't really in the sort of UFO scene, as well as not really big in the hacker scene. So there's lots of stuff I wasn't aware of, and if it had been, I probably would have done a better job and got more out of it. But as far as I know, the Majestic things aren't proven to be real or false yet, are they? And I don't like to accept anything that I don't know is you know, absolute fact, which is why I went to find out for myself.
Right.